welcome to One-on-One. I'm Vernon Ramazan. I'm pleased to say today we continue our conversation with Professor John Agard, who is the head of the Department of Life Sciences at UWI, and here in his capacity as the National Coordinator, easy for me to say, of ProEcoServ. Welcome back,
yes,
Professor.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for sticking around. Okay, we were talking on about a number of issues, but let's talk about where Trinidad and Tobago is right now in terms of some of the work that ProEcoServ is trying to achieve.
Yes.
And I know the spatial planning is key to that.
Yes. So one of the big objectives of the ProEcoServ project was to try and introduce the environment and ecosystem services into spatial planning, because it all starts with, a national plan. So that has gone very well. We've had a very good collaboration with the Ministry of Planning and Sustainable Development. And in fact, the Minister of Planning and Sustainable Development launched the project. Okay? So in this project, you would know that the government has now passed a new facilitation of development of land bill, new planning legislation, has been passed in Parliament and assented to by the President. And that piece of legislation requires that the development of the country be according to a national spatial development strategy. That strategy has been developed. There was public consultation. It's on the ministry's website. And in that strategy, it talks about incorporating ecosystem services and also climate change into the spatial planning of what you put where. So, as has been mentioned, there are certain places that should be protected because there are forests, there are services that are of benefit to people, and there are certain places where people shouldn't build things. It's going to flood every year as a floodplain. For example, we should be enforcing a hillside development policy. You shouldn't be building houses over a certain contour on slopes that have over a certain slope, for example, because we know there's going to be problems. Then you remove the cover and so forth. So all of those things should be in the big plan for the country, okay? Should be laid out, what areas need to be protected, what areas where development can take place and so forth. So this project has helped to contribute towards incorporating the ecosystem services part. And that will have to be mapped and incorporated into the maps and so forth to help inform planners. So up to a day ago, we had a workshop in planning with the planners, and where we had one of our partners, Stanford University, has some software, the Invest software it is called, that shows it's freely available online, and started to do some initial, contact with the planners and training and so on, and using that kind of software to incorporate these considerations into planning decisions. It's not to tell planners what to do, but quite frequently we get into trouble in Trinidad and Tobago. You want to do something, build a road, you want to do whatever, and there are people who disagree that the environmental aspects have been properly taken into consideration.
Well, we have that playing out in front of us right now.
We have it playing out on an ongoing basis. We have people up in arms and so forth. They say it will flood, all kinds of things, because they're not convinced that we've properly taken that into consideration and allowed people to be part of the process and the decision making. So part of the ProEcoServ project is also to help to develop a system that could be done. So as I said, we've tools, technical tools like software and so forth, freely available, that will help to show how those things could be incorporated, so that those who are making decisions have before them scenarios of, if I did this, what might be the consequence? If I did this, what might be before they make a decision?
So like a cost benefit sort of laid out.
Right, that's correct, yes, and scenarios of options, yes? And to aid in decision making. So our thing was that in this project, to help to aid those who make the decisions, with helping to provide them with some tools to aid decision making, okay? Software and other kinds of tools for scenarios and incorporation of ecosystem services and valuation of ecosystem services.
So basically, if people are thinking what you're talking about is very airy-fairy, you're actually showing that it's actually tangibly being incorporated into national policy.
So people might not be aware that in Trinidad and Tobago, that all of this is going on. This is exploratory, I should say. Okay? It's not part of an official system, but certainly there is work going on where in university, there are a number of students who are in the field collecting data. There are meetings going on in communities in Trinidad and also in Tobago. There have been several meetings in Tobago and in Trinidad and Tobago, and involvement from ministries and agencies. So the chair of the ProEcoServ project is the permanent secretary of the Ministry of Planning and Sustainable Development, is the chair of the committee. And on the steering committee of the project are representatives of other ministries and agencies and NGOs. NGOs in Tobago, you know, CARDI, you know, other ministries and so on, planning, food production, etc. The previous chair of the steering committee was the acting PS at the time of the Ministry of Planning. Okay, so there's an intimate association with the government agencies.
I guess it helps the fact that you've got eager ears and that the current Minister of Planning has obviously very close ties to UE and therefore would be receptive to discussions that are perhaps outside the normal realm of things.
I would take it that, remember there was a Ministry of Planning and the Economy, and there were some changes and the name was changed to Planning and Sustainable Development. So the incorporation of the word sustainable development is an aspiration that sustainability is a key aspect that needs to be incorporated into decision making, so that conceptually you have a bit of a problem of a mismatch of scales. If you are in a decision making position, you would normally think short term, or what can I deliver that's very visible to people, okay? I would imagine if you're a politician, that would be 5 years, got to deliver tangible things. If you're thinking from a sustainability point of view, you have to think longer, of consequences over the longer term. You might do something now, which looks like it might bring you some value now, but over years now, you might grow to regret this, okay? Which is frequently what happens in Trinidad and Tobago. This is one of the reasons why, for example, in the newspapers, there was an outpouring of people worrying about building back a road in Manzanilla Mayaro and starting in 3 weeks. They say you need to plan properly, otherwise it will wash away again. It has happened before, right? In the early 70s, okay? And now we hear that you have layers of asphalt down and sand. There's no foundation and stuff like that. Plan properly, otherwise you'll be wasting money dealing with the problem over and over again because you wouldn't find a solution.
So you have to look at long term. Right.
Think long. So that is part of the transition that you want to help to stimulate in Trinidad and Tobago, to think long, plan with a long-term perspective in mind. That is why I said the main targets of the project were planning and finance, okay? We were assuming that although we have the PS of the steering committee as the PS of the Ministry of Environment and Water Resources, they are the converted, okay? It is to try and get all of the other ministries and agencies and so forth, and the private sector as well, to partner as part of the transition to thinking in a more holistic way. That is part of what the UN is interested in, because they are trying to get some lessons learned that they could then help in passing on to other countries. As I said, Trinidad is a pilot, okay?
Right.
Yeah.
And as we're talking about the long term, which I know is something that you deal in your field,
yes.
and of course you're well known especially for looking at the work in terms of climate change.
Yes.
To a very large extent, Trinidad and Tobago, because of, even though our total contribution to the overall gross amount of pollution and carbon is relatively small as a per capita, it's actually very, very high.
Yeah, per capita.
So basically what we're doing as a small island state is helping to drown ourselves and our neighbors.
Yes, well, our footprint is disproportionate to our size of our country of 1.3 million people. Many would argue that we shouldn't worry about per capita, contribution. It's the total amount, and if the total amount is 1%, well, 1% is modest, although it's disproportionate for a country of this size. But there are higher issues of morality and responsibility, joining with the global community, to not be aloof and arrogant that we don't care, because we have a petroleum economy and we make money off of the misery of others, okay? Of course, the current situation, the price of oil going down, shows the foolishness of thinking that anything will last forever, So we have to enter with the global community. And a lot of what you think the transitions that we want to make sense, because it will save you money purely from an economic point of view. So let me just mention oil pollution, for example. If you have an oil spill or you have losses of oil and it's going into the Guaraca River, that's what you sell. And even if oil is $60 a barrel, every barrel that goes down the Guaraca River is products that you could have made money for, okay? So purely on the basis of economics.
But it's also a cost because you've got to recover it. Otherwise, it's
and
going to damage the marine environment.
Cost. Yeah. But I'm saying a lot of what you lose as pollution, right, is product, whether it is methanol, whatever it is. And if you did your business better, you would save money, just based on the economics. No tree hugging here, okay?
But technology changes that view as well, doesn't it? Because for a long
But
time,
cleaner technology,
natural gas was a byproduct.
Right.
That
So we
was
flare off a lot of gas, and because we flare off a lot of gas, that contributes to our carbon footprint. So people would say, if you reduce the flaring off, isn't that gas, you're burning it off, that provides energy. Could we do something else with it rather than burning it off, for example? So we have a lot of examples of that where we have things that can be converted into money that, you know, we small and we rich, so we don't care, so we, you know.
Well, but in many ways, you're sort of working, you're doing excellent work, but you're sort of going counter to existing government policies that's there. For example, we pay very low electricity rates, we pay little value on the electricity and the power we generate.
Yes. It's one of the cheapest in the world.
We have subsidized diesel and fuel,
Yes.
so we're basically saying, you know, keep using as much as you want, we're going to keep subsidizing it.
Yes, yes. So that has been the perception that most people have of the basis of the whole problem. Because of the unique peculiarity of Trinidad and Tobago, where energy is cheap, it makes us inefficient. If you increase the price of gasoline, for example, or the price of electricity, people would consider more carefully their use of it because their bill would increase. Okay, but you know, it's not only negative. We already spoke about if you had photovoltaics, if you had solar panels, and we made that in your interest to make the investment because the tax write-off, you would make back what you spend on buying the solar panels. In Barbados, I'm told it's about 4 years you would make back. Yeah. And you have a feed-in tariff. That is, if you generate more electricity on your premises than you utilize,
or can store,
or can store, you feed it into the grid, and instead of getting a bill, you get a check. That's the case in Barbados.
Basically, your meter will be rolling back.
Barbados next door, that is the case. Surely we could do that, you know. But considering all of these things, instead of being viewed negatively, it produces an opportunity. People think, I could get a check, right? That is in your own domestic house. But what about all the schools? Couldn't that all the schools have solar panels? Couldn't the school get some income instead of having to pay a bill for electricity for money that they don't have? Could they have a source of income because they have a lot of space and they have solar panels on the roof?
And that's great thinking, but again, as we just mentioned, the fact that we've got this very low electricity price means that there's no incentive to get to the point of generating
That's why
solar.
you need government to change the economics to make it in your while. So if you had tax credit for purchasing, you know, and you take off customs duties and so on for importing panels. But I want to mention also, again, if solar panels are so important, you know, obviously, why aren't we manufacturing solar panels? We have surplus energy, and close to us in Guyana has the perfect material for making solar panels. That is fine quartz. Because Guyana has a lot, it's low-lying and has had millennia of water, it's filtered the sand so that the quartz, the fine quartz sand grains are right up at the top. But it requires a lot of energy in order to, you know, for the furnaces to melt the quartz to make the high-valued silicon products, wafers that you need for solar panels. Why doesn't Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana get together and create a business opportunity? So when we talk much about the green economy, so this project talks a lot about, in line with government's policy, they talk about green is not negative, it's producing opportunities and business opportunities and going in a different direction. We could be selling solar panels, we could have a feed-in tariff where people can generate opportunities for people, we could be reforesting, you know, we could remediating, people could be getting money because we're already collecting money from the Green Fund, for example. All of this is stimulating activity rather than regarding everything that's environmental as a negative tree-hugging thing of no value.
Didn't we see US President Obama also announce that when shortly after he came into office, that part of the way of getting the US economy going again was to focus on the green economy?
Yes, so exactly. So in the case of the United States, since the president is in his second term, he's gone for broke, and he's really indicated that the matter of environment is a legacy issue for him. And he's prepared to invoke executive powers to go against Congress. Okay? And so, you know, there's all kinds of politics going on there. But he's taken on board that this is going to be one of his main legacy contributions, okay? Particularly with regard to climate change. But stimulating the green economy, where the United States is saying, you know, this is the United States. Surely we should be the ones selling all the windmills and the solar panels, not the Chinese, okay? We have always been the ones who are technologically adept to get there first and to create a marketplace. Why are they selling all of the fuel-efficient cars coming out of Europe? Everybody's driving a small car. Why in America people want to drive big, fuel-guzzling cars? We should be capturing that market. We should have the most fuel-efficient cars. This will be business and employment, and that's the way to think. Okay. And let me give you an example from. Might be not a good thing for me to say it, but BP in Trinidad and Tobago. We used to no longer go as British Petroleum.
Right.
Right. BP says no. BP now is beyond petroleum. Okay. And we sell energy. And at the moment, we sell energy mainly based on fossil fuels. So in Trinidad and Tobago, we will still be the ones selling you the energy. When your fossil fuels run out, we'll be selling you all the windmills and the solar panels. That is why they created two other companies, BP Solar and BP Alternate Energy. They make windmills and they make solar panels. They say we sell energy. Happens to come from fossil fuel, but when it runs out...
Might be the best example right now, given BP's laying off like massively and looking at a possible takeover by Shell.
What I'm trying to indicate is the thinking.
To be forward-thinking.
To look for the opportunities rather than to regard it as a negative thing. Okay? Because that is part of our problem. Oh, environmentalists are getting in the way. Rather than looking for the opportunities where we could employ people, we could generate business and so forth. This is essentially what the green economy, there are new opportunities. Okay? So we could be trading carbon, for example. We could mobilize the Green Fund to have people work in the communities all across Trinidad and Tobago, replanting trees, remediating areas and so forth, and getting paid. Benefits that enhances human well-being. This is really what it is we're trying to stimulate. So we are saying, rather than a one-off thing in a project, it has to be incorporated into the heights of the economy. So in the planning, it has got to be in the plan. So then it survives who is in government. Governments may change, ministers may change. It can't be that that was your thing and we discard everything. It's got to be in the country's plan, okay? And which the people of the country were involved in formulating the plan. They think it's a good idea, this way of doing things. And it also has got to be an economy, because we seem to don't think that anything that is not put into dollars and cents and in the budget is worth anything, right? So we have to value these assets that we are creating, and we should incorporate them into the accounting in a formal way, okay? So when they go up or down, the Minister of Finance should be reporting, okay, on this. This is essentially what has been globally agreed, okay, and in which they're looking for some pilot countries to do some exploratory examples of this, from which they could learn from the feedback, what works, what doesn't work, and therefore how it should be modified, and then become, the way in which all countries are doing it. This is the opportunity that Trinidad and Tobago has.
But in any sort of major shift into a sort of a new dynamic of the economy, there almost has to be a critical kind of tipping point, doesn't there?
Yes.
I mean, if we look at the US, we were talking about economy cars, for example, it wasn't until the OPEC oil crisis in the 70s, and even then it took them a long time for US car companies to say, well, maybe we shouldn't be making a 25-foot long car.
Yes.
So it has to reach a crunch point, and then people suddenly realize we can move on.
Yes, but one has to get the country on a trajectory. So sustainable development is something you'll never really achieve, okay? You can make claims, but you wouldn't really, but it's a way of doing things on a trajectory. You'll always be modifying things to thinking longer term, okay? So when you look at the countries in Europe, particularly in Scandinavia, who are closest to this ideal, some like Norway are big oil producers, have smelters, have all kinds of things, but are very finely balanced. If you go to Norway, on a Monday, the truck passes in front, only clear glass is collected, and it's only in bags that are thick brown paper bags, not plastic, okay? On another day, on Wednesday, only colored glass is collected, only organic material is collected another day. And all of this, at the moment in Norway, they even import waste from other countries because they generate energy off of the waste, and they don't produce enough. So they say, well, if you pay us, we'll take your waste, we'll put it in our furnaces, we'll generate energy off it, and we'll also make money. So they look to exploit every business opportunity, right? And they have this finely balanced. They are so far ahead. Here, you put your plastic bag out, the dogs burst it, it spreads, you know,
or it magically disappears and
yes,
gets thrown in the dump. You don't really care about that
yes,
anymore.
yes.
It's gone.
So,
but I mean, we don't even handle the basics very well in this country when it comes to having
yes,
normal institutions
yes,
running,
yeah.
much less fine-tuning to the point where we could be in Norway.
But we have to get on the road. Okay?
So it's like aspirational.
Right, so it's aspirational. That's why I'm going back to the Ministry of Planning and Sustainable Development, rather than it's planning and economies. Economy sounds money. It's all about money.
Mm-hmm.
What it is that in the current government, they've said it's all about sustainable development. That's a big objective. That's the umbrella under which everything else falls. So what are the details now? If you're saying so, what are the details now of how you're going to show in a tangible way that you're incorporating, you know, that kind of thinking in everything that you do? Thinking in the long-term interests of the country, not the immediate, you know, what might look, you know, popular now, but might cause us consequences later on because we did the wrong thing. That is essentially the basis of why we have ongoing controversies with environmental things, you know.
And as you mentioned, I mean, the fact is that governments tend to run in 5-year cycles,
right, so,
and everything is about that 5 years.
Yes, so the worry is that this thinking is short-term and not about the long-term.
So you're trying to get the institutions themselves.
Right, so that is why there's an interest in trying to influence institutions to expand their thinking in a more holistic way.
Do you honestly think that because this new way of looking at economics is now developing, do you see it as being the way of looking at economics and accounting in, let's say, the next 20 years, 30 years?
Well, at the moment, this is the trajectory of where things are going. The standard, the accounting standard, where the system of environmental economic accounting, you can, if you Google it, you can download it, has on the front of it the logos of the World Bank and United Nations and the OECD and so forth. And it was produced by the UN Statistical Division, okay? And it was laid in the UN, and there's no dissent. All the countries voted for it, I am told, including Trinidad and Tobago. Everybody recognizes that this makes sense to do things in this way. So it's just a matter now of getting pilot countries.
Which is where ProEcoServ comes in.
Right. So we, as a country, Trinidad and Tobago hasn't dissented in any way from any of this, that this makes perfect sense. Is to actually try and see if you could start doing this and to see if it turns out to be of any value. If it doesn't turn out to any value, well, that will also be a message that will go back. This was a waste of time.
I mean,
okay?
is $6 million US for all these countries enough to sort of get the ball
Well,
rolling?
no, this is an initial project. Okay, so they are talking about a follow-up project, particularly on the natural capital accounting. So there was an inquiry about whether they were interested in a follow-up project on this matter.
Well, Professor Agard, we're almost out of time, but I can't let you go since I have you here without asking you, obviously, one of the questions I think everybody asks you all the time. Should we still be worried about sea level rise in this region? Yes,
well, that's a no-brainer. We have sea level monitors in Trinidad and Tobago, and also down the Caribbean. But with regard to Trinidad and Tobago, there were a number of sea level monitors established, 2 decades ago. And they uplink data to satellites every few seconds. So we had data for about 12 years, and then a number of them were damaged over a short period of time. The one in Port of Spain Harbor was struck by a boat and not repaired for many years. One down in Galeota and one in Tobago and stuff. But they've all been repaired, and they are uplinking the data to the satellites. And I think a lot of this is available online, actually.
So we already have decades
of
data.
So we know that more than a decade ago, sea level rise was about 1.8 millimeters per year. And at present, it's about 3 millimeters per year. So it's increased 3 millimeters per year. So that even if we multiplied 3 millimeters by, 30 years or something, you would come up to some centimeters. That's a lot of water in the low-lying areas in Trinidad and Tobago where the sea level has increased a few centimeters. We are now more prone to storm surge. A little bit of wind will, and more prone to erosion. The lowest places in Trinidad and Tobago are in Caroni Swamp and a river. The Manzanilla-Mayaro Road is on a sand spit that separates the River Swamp from the Atlantic. The River Swamp was once a bay. It was a bay on the coast of Trinidad and Tobago.
I didn't know that, okay.
Right, so there have been many studies have been done. There is sand inside of there, former beaches, okay? Those who know that area will know about Sand Hill inside of there. Sand, it was a bay. So seawater used to flow around our bay.
And that was before
Sand was
the accelerated rise.
Right. So so sand has been deposited across the mouth of the bay, which is a sand spit, and we have put a road on it. The Atlantic is trying to rejoin the river swarm by removing the sand spit. The sea level rise on the one side is eroding. The wide beach that we used to have there, where you used to get all your chip and stuff, has been vanishing at an astounding rate. And it's required putting miles of stones and fortifications to prevent, complete erosion. We've had occasions where seawater has gone across the road at high tide. And on the other side, the incident that occurred recently has demonstrated that now if you have too much, high intensity of rainfall in too short a period, now get an attack from the other side. So it's trying to remove the sand spit. Okay, and let the sea rejoin in a river.
So in other words, we should be worried about sea level rise.
We should plan properly and do some proper engineering and drainage.
Professor Agard, it's been a tremendous pleasure having these two interviews with you, and thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure being here.
Pleasure.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much. You've been watching One-on-One. Join us again tomorrow for another edition.
There was public consultation. It's on the ministry's website. And in that strategy, it talks about incorporating ecosystem services and also climate change into the spatial planning of what you put where. So, as has been mentioned, there are certain places that should be protected because there are forests, there are services that are of benefit to people, and there are certain places where people shouldn't build things. It's going to flood every year as a floodplain. For example, we should be enforcing a hill section with the Ministry of Planning and Sustainable Development. And in fact, the Minister of Planning and Sustainable Development launched the project. Okay, so in this project, you would know that the government has now passed a new facilitation of development of land bill, new planning legislation, has been passed in Parliament and assented to by the President. And that piece of legislation requires that the development of the country be according to a national spatial development strategy. That strategy has been developed.
Welcome to One-on-One. I'm Vernon Ramazan. I'm pleased to say today we continue our conversation with Professor John Agard, who is the head of the Department of Life Sciences at UWI, and here in his capacity as the national coordinator, easy for me to say, of ProEcoServ. Welcome back,
yes,
Professor.
Thanks very much for having me.
Thanks for sticking around. Okay, we were talking on about a number of issues, but let's talk about where Trinidad and Tobago is right now in terms of some of the work that ProEcoServ is trying to achieve.
Yes.
And I know the spatial planning is key to that.
Yes. So one of the big objectives of the ProEcoServ project was to try and introduce the environment and ecosystem services into spatial planning, because it all starts with a national plan. So that has gone very well. We've had a very good collaboration